The day Aunt Eleanor died, I was elbow-deep in garden soil, planting the heirloom roses she'd given me for my birthday. My phone buzzed 3 times before I finally pulled off my gloves to answer it. "Miss Blackwood?" A formal voice I didn't recognize. "This is James Morton, your Aunt Eleanor's attorney. I'm afraid I have some difficult news." My heart stopped. The roses suddenly felt heavy in my hands. Eleanor's last gift to me. "What happened?" "Your aunt passed away in her sleep last night. He hesitated. "She left explicit instructions for me to contact you first, before anyone else in the family." I sank to my knees in the dirt, barely registering his words. Aunt Eleanor, the woman who taught me to read, who'd snuck me chocolate chip cookies during dreary family functions, who'd supported every dream I'd ever had, was gone. "Miss Blackwood, are you there?" "Yes," I managed. "I'm here." What do you need me to do?" "Your aunt left specific instructions about her funeral arrangements." And another pause. "She left you a letter that must be opened before the service. Would you be able to come to my office today?" I looked down at the roses. Queen Elizabeth variety, Eleanor's favorite. She'd handed them to me just 2 weeks ago, her eyes twinkling with her usual mischief. "These have been in my family for generations," she'd said, "just like secrets." At the time, I'd thought it was just another of her cryptic comments. Now, I wasn't so sure. "I'll be there in an hour," I told the lawyer. James Morton's office was exactly what you'd expect from someone who handled old money. All dark wood and leather-bound books, with a view of the city skyline that probably cost more than my yearly salary. He stood as I entered, offering a sympathetic smile. "Miss Blackwood, thank you for coming so quickly. Please, have a seat." I sat in one of the plush leather chairs, trying not to fit it. "Mr. Morton, what's this about? Why did Aunt Eleanor want you to contact me first?" He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out 2 envelopes. One was thick, official-looking, with the law firm's letterhead. The other was smaller, cream-colored, with my name written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. "Your aunt was an unusual woman," Morton said carefully. "Brilliant in business, but also quite particular about how things should be done. She left very specific instructions about her will and her funeral arrangements." "That sounds like Eleanor," I said softly. He slid the cream envelope across the desk. "She wanted you to read this privately. Then we can discuss the rest." My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the envelope. Eleanor's distinctive perfume, roses and vanilla, still clung to the paper. I opened it carefully, pulling out a single sheet of her personal stationery. "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, I've finally run out of time. Don't be sad. I've lived exactly the life I wanted, which is more than most people can say. But I need one last favor from you, my darling niece. At my funeral, you'll need to read a letter. One that will change our family forever. You'll find it in the hidden compartment of my jewelry box, the one I showed you how to open when you were 12. Remember the trick with the rose carving? Some people might call this revenge, but I prefer to think of it as justice. Long delayed, perhaps, but justice nonetheless. The truth is, I've left everything to you. Montgomery Industries, my personal assets, all of it. But there's one condition. You must read that letter at my funeral, with the entire family present. No exceptions. I know this is a lot to ask, especially now. But you've always been the strong one, Olivia. The honest one. That's why it has to be you. All my love, Aunt Eleanor. P.S. Don't let them bury me in anything beige. You know how I feel about beige." I read the letter twice, then looked up at Morton. She left everything to me. He nodded, opening the official envelope. Montgomery Industries, her personal estate, investment portfolios, approximately $89 million in total assets. But as she mentioned, it's conditional on you fulfilling her final request. My head spun. Eleanor had always been generous with me, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. What about the rest of the family? My father, my cousins? There are some small bequests, but the bulk of the estate is yours. Assuming, of course, you agree to her terms. I thought about my father, who'd always resented his younger sister's success. About my cousins, who'd spent years sucking up to Eleanor, hoping to inherit her fortune. About all the family gatherings where Eleanor had sat quietly, watching everyone with those knowing eyes of hers, like she was waiting for something. When is the funeral? I asked. 3 days from now. Your aunt was very specific about the arrangements. The service will be held at St. Michael's Cathedral, followed by a reception at her estate. The entire family is expected to attend. I stood up, clutching Eleanor's letter. Then I should go. I have a jewelry box to find. Morton called after me as I reached the door. Miss Blackwood? One more thing. Your aunt asked me to tell you. She said you'll know what to do with the truth. The drive to Eleanor's estate took 40 minutes, but it felt like hours. My mind raced with questions. What was it in that second letter? What secret was so important that Eleanor would make it a condition of her will? The gates opened automatically as I approached. Eleanor had given me the access code years ago, saying she trusted me more than her security system. The house was exactly as I remembered. A sprawling Victorian mansion set amid perfectly manicured gardens, with Eleanor's beloved roses climbing every available surface. Mrs. Peters, the housekeeper, met me at the door. Her eyes were red from crying. "Oh, Miss Olivia, I'm so glad you're here. She left instructions that you were to have full access to her rooms." "Thank you, Mrs. Peters. I won't be long." Eleanor's bedroom was on the second floor, overlooking her prize, rose garden. Like everything else about my aunt, it was elegant but full of hidden whimsy. Silk curtains in bright patterns, modern art next to family portraits, and everywhere, touches of her beloved roses. The jewelry box sat on her dresser, exactly where it had always been. Beautiful Brazilian rosewood, carved with intricate floral patterns. I ran my fingers along the edge until I found it. The small rose carving that concealed the release for the hidden compartment. "Third petal from the left," I whispered, remembering Eleanor's instructions from all those years ago. There was a soft click, and a panel in the bottom slid open. Inside was another envelope, sealed with wax and marked to be read at my funeral. My hand shook as I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected, and I could feel what seemed like photographs inside. For a moment, I was tempted to open it right there. But I knew Eleanor. Everything she did had a purpose. If she wanted this revealed at her funeral, in front of the whole family, she must have had her reasons. I slipped the envelope into my bag and took one last look around the room. On the bedside table was a framed photo I'd never seen before. Eleanor as a young woman, standing in front of Montgomery Industries' first office. She was smiling that knowing smile of hers, the one that always made me feel like she could see right through people's pretenses. "What did you know, Aunt Eleanor?" I whispered to the photograph. What secret was worth waiting a lifetime to reveal? The next 3 days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and family drama. My father called 6 times, alternating between concern about my involvement in the arrangements and barely concealed anxiety about the will. My cousins sent a barrage of text messages, each one more transparently self-interested than the last. Through it all, I kept Eleanor's sealed envelope close. At night, I'd take it out and look at it, wondering what revelations it contained. What truth was so important that Eleanor would stake her entire legacy on its revelation? The morning of the funeral dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a deep blue suit, Eleanor's favorite color, and pinned one of her prized roses to my lapel. The envelope felt heavy in my bag, like it was weighted with more than just paper and photographs. St. Michael's Cathedral was packed by the time I arrived. The Montgomerys were old money, and Eleanor had been a prominent figure in both business and philanthropy. The pews were filled with a mix of family, business associates, and city officials. My father intercepted me as soon as I entered, his face tight with anxiety. "Olivia, we need to talk about the will. Morton won't tell us anything. Says we have to wait until after the service." "What's going on?" I met his eyes steadily. "We'll all find out together, Dad. That's what Aunt Eleanor wanted." He grabbed my arm as I tried to pass. "Olivia, if you know something..." "Let go, Dad," I said quietly, but firmly. "This is Eleanor's funeral. Show some respect." The service itself was beautiful, exactly as Eleanor would have wanted it. No beige in sight. The flowers were all roses in deep reds and vibrant pinks, her favorite colors. The minister spoke about her generosity, her intelligence, her dedication to making the world better. Finally, it was time. Morton caught my eye from the front pew and gave a slight nod. My hands trembled slightly as I walked to the podium, Eleanor's envelope clutched in my hands. The cathedral fell silent as I faced the congregation. My father sat in the front row, his face a mask of barely controlled anxiety. Next to him, my cousins John and Rebecca leaned forward eagerly, like vultures awaiting their next meal. I took a deep breath, breathing in the scent of roses that filled the air. In that moment, I could almost feel Eleanor standing beside me, giving me strength. Before she died, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. My Aunt Eleanor left me a letter with specific instructions. She wanted it read here today, in front of everyone who knew her. I broke the wax seal slowly, aware of hundreds of eyes watching my every move. Inside were several sheets of paper, and as I'd suspected, photographs. As I pulled them out, I heard my father make a strangled sound from the front pew. The first photograph showed a young Eleanor standing next to a man I didn't recognize. They were both smiling, holding up what looked like blueprints. The second photo showed the same man at what appeared to be a construction site, with the early foundations of what I now recognized as Montgomery Industries' first building. "My name was Eleanor Montgomery," I read from the letter. "And this is the truth about how Montgomery Industries began." My hands were steady as I began reading Eleanor's letter, my voice carrying clearly through the hushed cathedral. "My name was Eleanor Montgomery, and this is the truth about how Montgomery Industries began. The man in these photographs is Harold Bennett, a brilliant engineer and my business partner in 1975. He was also the true founder of what would become Montgomery Industries." A murmur rippled through the congregation. In the front row, my father's face had gone completely white. "Harold and I met at university," I continued reading. "We shared a vision of creating sustainable building materials that would revolutionize the construction industry. Harold had the technical genius, and I had the business acumen. Together, we created the foundation of what Montgomery Industries would become." I pulled out another photograph, This one showing Eleanor and Harold shaking hands over what appeared to be a contract. We were equal partners, splitting everything 50-50. The patents, the company, the profits, all of it was shared between us. Until the night of October 15, 1976, when Harold died in what was reported as a car accident. My father started to stand, but my Uncle James pulled him back down. I kept reading. But it wasn't an accident. The brake lines in Harold's car had been cut. I discovered this too late, after the police had already closed the case. I also discovered something else. Papers had been filed just hours before Harold's death, transferring his entire share of the company to the Montgomery Family Trust. Papers that bore his signature. I looked up, meeting my father's eyes directly. A signature that I now know was forged by his business partner at the time, my own brother, Richard Montgomery. The cathedral erupted in gasps and whispers. My father stood up, his face contorted with rage. "Stop this immediately," he shouted. "This is slander." "No, Dad," I said calmly. "This is truth. Aunt Eleanor left proof." I held up a stack of documents from the envelope. The original contract between Eleanor and Harold. Forensic analysis of the forged documents. Police reports that were buried. Bank transfers. She kept everything. Why? The question came from my cousin John, who was staring at his uncle, my father, with dawning horror. Why reveal this now? I turned back to Eleanor's letter. "I'm revealing this now because I've spent 45 years building this company into something Harold would have been proud of. I've used our success to fund research, to support sustainable development, to create opportunities for brilliant minds like his. But I've also spent 45 years watching my brother profit from his crime, watching him raise his children to believe that privilege and power put them above the law." My father had sunk back into his pew, all the fight gone out of him. I continued reading. "The truth is, I should have come forward years ago. But by the time I had gathered all the evidence, the company was employing thousands of people. Going public would have destroyed not just Richard, but countless innocent families who depended on Montgomery Industries for their livelihood. So I made a different choice. I decided to wait, to build, to make sure that when the truth finally came out, the company would survive it." I pulled out one final document from the envelope, a yellowed envelope addressed to Harold Bennett's only surviving relative, his daughter Sarah. Which brings me to my final confession. Over the years, I've kept track of Harold's daughter. I've anonymously funded her education, her research, her work in sustainable engineering. I've watched her grow into the kind of brilliant, ethical scientist her father was. Sarah Bennett now runs one of the most innovative green technology firms in the country, though she's never known who was backing her. More guests filled the cathedral as a woman stood up from the middle pews. She was about my age, with Harold's dark eyes and determined expression. Eleanor had arranged everything, even ensuring Sarah Bennett would be here for this moment. The second part of my will, I read, my voice growing stronger, leads a 30% share of Montgomery Industries to Sarah Bennett as partial restitution for what was stolen from her father. The controlling interest goes to my niece Olivia, the only member of the Montgomery family who has shown the same commitment to ethics and innovation that Harold and I once shared. I looked up at the stunned faces before me. The letter is signed, Eleanor Montgomery, co-founder of Montgomery Industries and keeper of its greatest shame. The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, Sarah Bennett began walking toward the front of the cathedral. She stopped in front of my father, who seemed to have aged decades in the past few minutes. All these years, Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. I thought my father was a failure who abandoned his work. I never knew. Never imagined. Miss Bennet, I said, stepping down from the podium. I'm so sorry for what was taken from you. She turned to me, tears in her eyes. Thank you for having the courage to read that letter. Your aunt? She was watching over me my whole life, wasn't she? She was trying to make things right, I said softly, in her own way. The next few hours passed in a blur. The reception was unsurprisingly tense, with family members splitting into factions. Those who demanded the letter be suppressed, those who insisted on going to the police, and those who simply sat in stunned silence. My father disappeared immediately after the service. I wouldn't hear from him for weeks, not until he checked himself into a rehabilitation facility, finally facing the guilt he carried for 45 years. In the months that followed, the truth about Montgomery Industries' founding became public knowledge. But Eleanor had been right. The company was strong enough to survive it. With Sarah Bennett's technical expertise and my commitment to Eleanor's vision, we began a new chapter in the company's history. 1 year after the funeral, I stood in Eleanor's rose garden, now blooming more beautifully than ever. Sarah had joined me for what had become our weekly meeting, where we discussed everything from company strategy to our shared love of sustainable innovation. You know what's strange? Sarah said, gently touching one of Eleanor's prized Queen Elizabeth roses. I always felt like someone was looking out for me, guiding my career from afar. I used to think it was my father's spirit. Now I know it was Eleanor. She tried to protect everyone, I said. The company, its employees, you, even my father in her own way. She just couldn't let the truth die with her. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Do you think she made the right choice? Waiting all those years? I considered the question carefully. I think she did the best she could with an impossible situation. She turned a company built on fraud into a force for good. She made sure you were taken care of. And in the end, she made sure the truth came out on her terms. And what about you? Sarah asked. Do you ever regret being the one who had to reveal it all? I looked out over the rose garden, remembering Eleanor's knowing smile, her cryptic comments, her quiet strength. No, I said finally. Eleanor chose me because she knew I could handle it. She knew I'd understand that sometimes doing the right thing means facing uncomfortable truths. She would be proud of what we've built, Sarah said, gesturing toward the Montgomery Industries building visible in the distance. A real partnership, just like she and my father intended. I smiled, touching one of the roses Eleanor had given me, now blooming in her garden. She once told me these roses had been in her family for generations, just like secrets. But maybe it's time for new traditions. Truth instead of secrets. Partnership instead of power. Building something together instead of taking from each other. Sarah squeezed my hand. I think both our fathers would like that. That evening, as I sat in Eleanor's study, now my study, going over company reports, I found a small note tucked into her old desk calendar. It was dated the day she died, written in her elegant hand. Dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, you've done what I asked. You've faced the truth and handled it with grace. That's why I chose you, not just to inherit the company, but to make it better than it was, to make it what Harold and I dreamed it could be. The roses in the garden will bloom again next spring. When they do, remember that beauty can grow from even the darkest soil, if we have the courage to plant it. All my love, Eleanor. I placed the note carefully in my drawer and looked out at the garden, where the setting sun painted the roses in shades of gold. Eleanor had left me more than just a company. She'd left me a chance to right an old wrong, to build something meaningful, to prove that it's never too late for truth to bloom. Tomorrow, there would be meetings and decisions and all the responsibilities that came with running a multi-million-dollar company. But for now, I sat in the quiet of Eleanor's study, surrounded by the scent of roses, knowing that sometimes the heaviest inheritances aren't measured in money, but in the weight of the truths we choose to carry. And like Eleanor, I would carry this truth with grace, using it not to destroy, but to build, not to punish, but to heal, creating something beautiful from the soil of the past. After all, that's what Eleanor had done. That's what she had trained me to do. And somewhere, I knew she was watching with that knowing smile of hers, proud that her final secret had finally found its way into the light.